Welcome to Teolumen Insights, where we reveal the hidden forces that shape the way you live and show you how to use them to create real transformation and supercharge your health, mindset, and daily life. Here are your hosts, Emma Greenwood and Nathan Sinclair.
Okay, so strap yourselves in for this one, because today we're diving headfirst into Area 51.
Oh, yeah.
And not just any Area 51 story, but the one and only Bob Lazar. It's a story that demands what I like to call a cognitive recalibration.
The Bob Lazar story.
We're talking full immersion into his autobiography, Dreamland, dissecting every claim, every wild twist and turn right from the horse's mouth.
You got it, straight from the source. And we've also got the invaluable insights of George Knapp woven throughout this thing.
Exactly. So it's Lazar's personal account, but also that crucial journalistic context from Knapp.
So if you want the full picture of this story, the one that basically catapulted a little-known base in the Nevada desert into global obsession, this is your deep dive.
It's the express lane to understanding a story that has really shaped UFO lore as we know it.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking Area 51, right? You've probably seen the documentary.
Heard all the theories.
Oh, yeah.
But what we're doing here is going deeper.
We're looking at how this all began, how Area 51 went from a super-secret Air Force facility to, like you said, a global phenomenon.
I mean, think about it. Before Bob Lazar came forward in 1989,
Back in '89.
Area 51 was this obscure dot on the map, right?
Right.
Now it's synonymous with aliens, government conspiracies, the whole shebang.
It's like the poster child for everything extraterrestrial.
And it's had so many names over the years,
Oh.
Watertown, Paradise Ranch, Groom Lake, Dreamland. It's like it needed aliases to hide its true nature.
Well, that's the thing. The cover story was testing U-2 spy planes.
Right. Top secret stuff, but come on, we all know it's evolved into something far more complex.
Oh, yeah.
Our sources tell us it's this massive complex employing something like 2,000 people.
2000.
Yeah, working on God knows what, highly advanced, highly classified projects.
It's almost impossible to grasp how little anyone knew about Area 51 before all this blew up.
It's crazy.
Knapp talks about his early days at KLAS-TV back in 1981, and their entire archive on the base had like 24 news clippings.
24.
That's it. And even then, Aviation Week in Space Technology was like the only publication really trying to poke around and get some answers.
It shows you just how seismic a shift Lazar's story created.
It completely changed the game, and of course the government responded the only way they know how. More secrecy, more security.
Oh, absolutely. They went full lockdown.
Sensors, miles out, disguise cameras, everywhere you look. It was basically a huge keep out sign plastered all over the desert.
A very clear message that they were not messing around. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the controversy around Lazar's claims.
Yeah, because there have been some pretty serious attempts to discredit him.
Big time. Tons of researchers and skeptics out there saying he made it all up.
Even some heavy hitters in the UFO community like Stanton Friedman.
Yeah, Friedman.
Brilliant nuclear physicist, incredibly respected, but even Knapp, who clearly admires Friedman's work, says he had this blind spot when it came to Lazar.
Like he just couldn't accept any of it.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
And Friedman was adamant that he'd exposed Lazar as a liar.
Yeah, he claimed to have the receipts.
But Knapp points out that Friedman's supposed smoking gun was actually already public knowledge.
It was reported in KLAS-TV's initial coverage.
So it makes you wonder about the whole nature of evidence and how it's presented, right?
Definitely, especially in a case like this that's so charged and complex.
Now, putting the debunkers aside for a second,
Sure.
there are specific details Lazar revealed that were later corroborated, and some of them were almost too small to be made up.
You're talking about those little details that add up.
Yeah, like Robert Scott Lazar being listed in the Law Mail phone book during the exact time he said he worked there.
Oh, yeah, tell.
He was visiting LNL on the same day that article was published.
So placing Lazar in that environment at that specific time?
And then there's the whole S4 thing.
Yes, S4.
Lazar talked about it being a designation within the Nellis Air Force Base range.
Which wasn't public knowledge then.
Not at all. And when Knapp asked a base spokesperson, they confirmed that S4 did exist.
So there was something there, even if they wouldn't say what it was or where?
Exactly. And there's more. Lazar even correctly identified Mike Thigpen, the government agent who did part of his background check.
Wow, these are pretty specific things to just invent.
Right. But here's the one that really makes you think. Lazar seemingly predicted Navy test flights of weird aircraft near Papoose Dry Lake.
Papoose Dry Lake.
which is where he pinpointed S4 being located.
And these were supposed to happen on 3 consecutive Wednesday nights in the spring of 1989.
And Knapp says that in all the pushback he got from military folks and ex-Area 51 employees, nobody ever refuted this point.
That's a pretty big detail to just ignore.
Yeah, very strange. Okay, so let's rewind a bit and look at how Lazar got mixed up in this whole thing in the first place.
His recruitment by EG&Gs, right?
That's the key.
This is where it all begins.
So Knapp details his first contact with EG&G and these interviews he had, and it's all a bit weird.
Not your typical job interview.
No, not at all. He felt overqualified for the first position, which is strange in itself, right?
Definitely.
And then they started talking about this senior physicist role in their special projects division.
Things escalated quickly.
It's like they were fishing for someone with his specific skill set.
Oh, yeah, they knew what they were looking for. And then there's this mysterious Dennis character.
Oh, Dennis.
He's like Lazar's shadow, always watching, always listening, but rarely speaking.
A very ominous presence.
Yeah, and the hiring process was all provisional.
They told him he needed a majestic clearance,
Majestic.
which sounds like something out of a spy movie, right?
Super high-level, top-secret stuff.
And they said he could keep running his photo developing business on the side while this clearance was pending.
The photo business, it's almost a grounding detail in all of this madness.
It is.
So they're flying him out to Groom Lake on Janet Air flights.
Those unmarked planes that have become legendary in themselves.
It's all cloak and dagger from the get-go.
The secrecy is just baked into the whole thing. So I'm curious, what was it like for Lazar when he finally landed at Area 51?
Well, he talks about his first flight on Janet Air, and Dennis just casually drops, "That's the Groom Lake facility below."
Just like that.
Yeah, matter of fact, no big reveal, no fanfare.
Then a navy blue school bus with blacked out windows to take them further into the base.
It sets the scene perfectly, doesn't it?
Totally. It's like stepping into another world. And inside the base, it's all business.
No time for chit-chat.
Lazar mentions that there's no idle chatter, no unnecessary formality.
Everyone's laser focused.
Like they're all part of some grand, unspoken mission.
Which, of course, they were.
All right, so let's dig a little deeper into Lazar's background.
Okay, so before all this Area 51 stuff.
Right, what was he all about? Well, he'd worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, LANL,
LANL.
designing alpha radiation detection systems.
So he already had experience with top secret government work.
Exactly, and he'd always been fascinated by things that go boom.
Oh, yeah.
Pyrotechnics, small explosions. He even built that jet-powered car we talked about.
So this interest in propulsion was always there.
From a young age.
Yeah.
And before LANL, he was at Pierce Junior College part-time, and he had a job at Fairchild Electronics working on bubble memory devices.
Early data storage.
Yeah. And then he moved to California and applied to LANL in 82.
82.
And it's interesting to hear him talk about security back then.
Compared to today.
Yeah, he says it was pretty lax.
Things have definitely changed since 9/11.
Understatement, right. But back then, LANL was like a dream come true for him.
He compares it to a Yankee fan on the field at Yankee Stadium.
He was in his element, surrounded by brilliant minds, cutting-edge science.
You can almost feel his excitement.
But that excitement eventually turned into disillusionment.
He started to get frustrated.
Big time. He saw what he felt was a huge waste of government resources.
And that frustration led to some questionable decisions.
The pranks.
Ah, the pranks.
Like the helium-3 incident.
Oh, yeah, that one's classic.
So he and a colleague, they're fed up, right?
They want to make a statement.
And they come across all this escaping helium-3.
Which is a pretty rare and expensive isotope, by the way.
Not cheap stuff. So they fill up trash bags with it.
Trash bag.
Trash bags full of helium-3. And to really drive the point home...
They slap on some danger radiation stickers.
Naturally.
And then they just let them loose.
Out into the world.
Talk about causing a stir.
The local area was freaking out.
People were calling the facility panicking about radioactive waste.
And of course, their supervisor was less than thrilled. Now, during his time at LANL, he had this really interesting encounter with a true legend of science, Edward Teller.
The father of the hydrogen bomb.
Teller himself, Lazar, attended one of his lectures.
Imagine being in that room.
It's like a history-making moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the book gives this really great rundown of Teller's background, from studying under Heisenberg and Bohr to his work on the Manhattan Project and his later push for the Strategic Defense Initiative.
Star Wars.
Star Wars, exactly. And here's the kicker. During the lecture, Teller recognizes Lazar.
Recognizes him.
Yeah, as the man with the jet car from that newspaper article.
Wow.
They even chatted afterwards, and Teller brought up a possible Russian relative of Lazar's named Lazarev.
Okay, that's a little creepy.
Right, like how did he even know that?
It's just another little detail that adds to the mystery of Lazar's story.
Before Lazar started officially working at S4, he had to go through a medical exam right there at the facility.
Standard procedure.
Seems pretty routine at first. They checked his vitals.
Hearing, eyesight, the usual.
But then they did this baseline allergy test, which involved injecting him with a bunch of different chemicals.
Like a grid on his arm.
Yeah, a grid of injections.
That's a little more than routine, isn't it?
It's like they were worried about him being exposed to something unusual.
Foreshadowing, perhaps?
For sure. And this brings us to the part of Lazar's story that really blows the doors off everything.
Yeah.
His initial briefing at S4.
Where it all gets real.
They showed him these photographs.
Black and white photographs.
And these photos were not for the faint of heart.
Nope.
The first one was this torso-like humanoid form.
Humanoid?
Yeah, like a being, but not quite human.
Okay.
And it had this T-shaped incision, and inside, not organs, not like anything you'd expect.
So what was this?
It was just this undifferentiated mass of tissue.
Like nothing you'd see in a human body.
Nothing familiar at all.
No wonder he was freaked out.
And the second photograph, it was smaller, and it had handwritten notes on it.
Notes from who?
From other people who had seen it.
So they were just as baffled.
Yeah, the notes were full of questions and theories.
This wasn't just Lazar's imagination running wild.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It was like everyone involved was struggling to understand what they were looking at.
Like they were piecing together a puzzle with missing pieces.
That's a great way to put it. So after that mind-blowing intro, they take him to see the reactor.
The heart of it all.
And this guy, Barry, he gives Lazar a demonstration of its gravity-emitting capabilities.
This is where it gets really wild.
So picture this. A small, tower-shaped reactor with a triangular fuel disk inside.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And Barry has this separate emitter device.
Another piece of the puzzle.
He points it at the reactor and activates it. And Lazar describes feeling this invisible force, a repulsion.
Like trying to push two magnets together?
Exactly, like something pushing back against him, even though there's nothing there.
This is like anti-gravity in action.
That's exactly what it seemed like. And Lazar gets into the whole concept of gravity, talking about Newton, Einstein, the quest for a unified field theory.
He even mentions historical ideas about anti-gravity from people like H.G. Wells and Tesla.
It's mind-blowing to think that back in '89, the idea of manipulating gravity was pure science fiction.
Purely theoretical.
And here he was witnessing it firsthand. And it's interesting, even in that moment of awe, he's still thinking about practical stuff.
What do you mean?
He mentions noticing some dust on the floor and thinking about cleaning it up.
Wow, grounding himself in the midst of the extraordinary.
It's a very human detail.
Yeah.
And the implications of this technology are just staggering.
It's paradigm-shifting stuff.
We're talking force fields, anti-gravity, propulsion that makes rockets look like toys.
The possibilities are endless.
The crazy thing is the device itself seems so simple.
No moving parts.
And the question that keeps coming up is how? How did they achieve this?
It's the ultimate enigma.
The paradox is that it works here on Earth, but it completely defies everything we understand about physics.
How can you have that much power from such a small reactor with no heat, no sound?
It's like it's operating on a different set of rules altogether.
Totally.
He even quotes Barry saying it was a science chasm.
Science chasm.
Yeah, but then he says it quickly turned into a science chasm because of the huge gap in understanding.
Like hitting a wall of the unknown.
And the efficiency of it all with no wasted heat is just mind-boggling.
Especially when you compare it to nuclear bombs or power plants that generate tons of heat.
This was something else entirely. But then Barry drops a bomb on him, figuratively speaking.
What happened?
He tells Lazar about a previous accident involving other researchers working on this technology.
An accident?
And he implies that people died.
Oh, wow.
It suddenly became very real, very dangerous.
Like they were playing with forces they didn't fully understand.
And the technology itself looked so harmless.
Deceptively simple.
It's like this ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. After that, Dennis has a little chat with Lazar and officially introduces Barry as his partner on this project.
Emphasizing the need for secrecy.
They also talk about Lazar's work schedule and his majestic clearance again.
Always reminding him.
Always watching. And the conversation Lazar has with Barry about the researchers who died in the accident.
That must have been chilling.
It's like a warning, a reminder of the stakes.
That even brilliant minds can make fatal mistakes with this technology.
It's a sobering thought. So Lazar's work schedule was all over the place.
Balancing EG&G with his photo business.
And often being on call to go to the base at a moment's notice.
Not exactly a 9 to 5.
Not even close. And Tracy, his wife, she was understanding to a point.
Her dad had worked at Los Alamos, so she knew the drill,
She knew about secrecy and weird schedules,
but it still put a strain on their relationship.
especially as Lazar became more and more consumed by the EG&G work,
You can imagine how distracting it would be.
and the security at the base was incredibly tight.
They were being watched constantly.
Escorts to the restroom, the cafeteria, everywhere.
It's like being in a high-tech prison.
Almost.
Yeah.
And Lazar described seeing inside a hangar one night, just a
And
glimpse,
it's a peek behind the curtain.
but enough to suggest the scale of what was going on there.
A whole other world hidden from view.
Lazar uses this really interesting analogy to explain the propulsion system's efficiency.
He compares it to a fireplace, right?
Yeah, a super efficient fireplace with a cool chimney.
So, no wasted heat,
It's like the energy is perfectly contained.
unlike our own electrical grid, which is full of inefficiencies and energy loss.
Exactly. And he mentions that a radio in their lab was playing without any interference from the reactor and emitter.
Another sign of this incredible energy containment.
So they start trying to figure out how this device actually works.
Investigating the reactor housing, the fuel disk.
Looking for any clues, any signs of electromagnetic fields, chemical traces, radiation.
Anything that could give them a lead.
And here's the kicker. The fuel disk emitted no dangerous radiation.
Despite being part of what seemed like a nuclear reaction.
It's like a whole new type of nuclear physics.
Something beyond our current understanding.
And then they do a chemical analysis of the fuel disk, and this is where it gets even weirder.
They use gas chromatography, right?
Yeah, they vaporize a sample of the fuel material and analyze it.
And the results are shocking.
But the chromatogram shows no spikes for any known element.
It's like it's made of something we've never seen before.
An entirely unknown element.
Imagine discovering a new element.
That's basically what they stumbled upon.
And this wasn't just a fluke. They did further analysis with electron ionization, mass spectrometry, and neutron activation analysis.
All pointing to the same conclusion. A single, unidentified element.
This is a major piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
Absolutely. It suggests a level of material science far beyond anything we've achieved.
Alien technology in every sense of the word. Understandably.
Then they have a breakthrough.
Yeah.
They managed to machine new fuel triangles at LNL.
Based on the specs Lazar and Barry gave them.
It's like this indirect collaboration between S4 and the outside world.
Leveraging existing resources without anyone knowing the true purpose.
A secret within a secret.
And then Lazar accidentally spills the beans to his friend Gene Huff.
Oh, no.
Gene was into explosives and pyrotechnics, too.
They bonded over things that go boom.
Leading to those infamous desert blast gatherings.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And Lazar was surprised by how little Gene questioned him about his work.
Like, he wasn't that fazed by it.
Almost too trusting.
And of course, Gene knew John Lear.
Which sets up another key encounter in this story.
The meeting of the minds.
Lazar meets John Lear, and Lear initially dismisses him as just a photo guy.
Until he learns about the LNL connection.
Then he's all ears.
They had shared interests.
And Lear had all these connections in government and the military.
He was deep in the world of conspiracies.
But Lazar remains skeptical of Lear's beliefs about alien spacecraft.
Which is kind of ironic, right?
Totally. Here's Lazar working with what seems like alien tech, but he's still cautious.
He's not buying everything he hears.
He's a scientist at heart. Then, Dennis asks Lazar to do something really strange. Register all his firearms?
Register his guns.
Yeah, it's a bizarre request.
And it freaks Lazar out.
Of course, he even has this weird encounter with a police officer who's like, why would anyone target you?
And then the officer mentions the Russians.
Talk about paranoia-inducing.
It's like they're trying to make him feel vulnerable.
And that feeling only intensifies when two guys from the Office of Federal Investigation show up at his
The
house,
home search.
unannounced.
While they had guests over.
It was a total invasion of privacy.
A clear sign that they were being watched very closely.
Meanwhile, back at S4, Lazar and Barry are getting frustrated because the reactor and emitter keep disappearing.
They're not always there when they need them.
Other teams are using them for who knows what,
It's like they're being kept in the dark.
deliberately prevented from seeing the whole picture.
From understanding how all the pieces fit together.
It's a classic case of compartmentalization.
Need-to-know basis.
Only they don't even know what they need to know.
It's maddening.
But then they get their first up-close look at one of the saucers,
Inside a hangar.
a real alien craft.
What was it like?
Lazar describes it as being about 50 feet in diameter and 20 feet tall.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, no landing gear, no seams, just this smooth, dark, aluminum-like skin.
It sounds almost otherworldly.
And he mentions these 4 black, rectangular areas near the top.
Maybe some kind of sensors?
Possibly.
Yeah.
And the inside was just as strange.
Seamless construction.
3 molded seats that looked like flower petals.
That's a unique design choice.
Everything had this matte finish, like it was all made from a single material.
Alien manufacturing techniques.
And they see more saucers later on.
A whole fleet of them.
8 more, all housed in these interconnected hangars.
It's like they're mass producing them.
And they even get to witness a low-performance test flight.
So one of these things actually takes off.
Yeah, it lifts off a little bit wobbling at first.
Not the smoothest takeoff.
And there's this blue corona discharge coming from the bottom.
What causes that?
Lazar believes it's the air ionizing and breaking down from the intense energy output.
Like a mini lightning storm.
And it's silent, completely silent.
And no engine roar.
Nothing. And the blue corona gets wider as the craft rises, stabilizing it.
It's like it's finding its balance.
And Lazar observes that there are 3 emitter devices on the bottom of the craft.
So that's the source of the lift.
Yeah, but it's only the downward-facing one that's creating the corona during this test.
Interesting.
They start using the term Omicron for the single emitter lift and Delta for the omnidirectional movement when all 3 are active.
Creating their own language to describe this alien tech.
They need a new vocabulary for this.
Absolutely. And to explain the propulsion system, Lazar uses this great analogy of a bowling ball on a mattress.
It's a simple way to visualize a complex concept.
So the emitters are creating these distortions in space-time.
Like dimples in the mattress.
And the craft moves by essentially removing the resistance of gravity in the direction it wants to go.
It's like surfing on gravity waves.
It's mind-blowing to think about.
And the gap between this technology and our own capabilities is immense.
Even if every country on Earth pooled their resources, we couldn't replicate this.
It's like they're operating on a whole different level of understanding.
Like comparing a bicycle to a spaceship.
And that nagging question of how they generate so much power with no wasted energy keeps coming up.
It's the ultimate scientific mystery.
It's like they've tapped into some fundamental force that we're completely oblivious to.
Lazar even wonders if it's similar to how martial arts uses an opponent's energy against them.
Redirecting forces, bending them to your will.
It's a fascinating thought.
So after all that, after seeing the craft and the test flight, EG&G goes silent.
They just drop off the radar.
No more contact, no explanations.
And the surveillance starts up again.
The mystery car is back.
Like they're making sure he knows they're watching.
It's creepy, right?
Big.
Even Tracy jokes about Lazar becoming a paranoid neighborhood watch type.
But underneath the jokes, there's real fear.
They both know something's not right.
And Lazar starts to realize just how much he's put himself at risk.
The background checks, the phone taps, the document he signed waiving his rights.
It all adds up to a very dangerous situation.
And he starts taking steps to protect himself.
To cover his tracks.
He tells Gene Huff about everything.
Even though Lear hadn't pushed him to do it.
He needed someone to know.
Share the burden.
And they come up with these code names, BFON and GUFON.
The Bob and Gene UFO networks.
It's almost comical in a way, but it's a serious situation.
Deadly serious.
And that becomes very clear when Lazar leaves a message for Gene using the BFON code word.
And he's immediately interrogated.
2 guys show up out of nowhere, demanding answers.
They were listening the whole time.
It's terrifying how quickly they responded.
It shows how closely they were monitoring him.
Then they decide to go on a little field trip to try and see more test flights.
A spontaneous road trip to Area 51.
With Gene, John Lear, and Tracy.
It's like a scene from a movie.
A bad movie because their car breaks down.
Of course it does.
But they do see something.
Lights over the Papoose Mountains.
Moving in ways that no known aircraft could.
And Lazar notices the color of the corona discharge is different this time.
More orange or brown instead of blue.
Maybe a different type of craft or a different energy source.
He wishes he had his spectrograph with him.
The scientist in him is always curious.
And Tracy's reaction to all this is strangely muted.
Like she's numb to it.
Maybe she's just in shock.
Or maybe she's seen too much already.
They try another observation trip with a rental car this time.
Trying to be more discreet.
But they're still being watched.
That feeling of paranoia is constant.
They can't escape it.
And they get caught.
Security spots them. A night vision light shines on them.
And they're questioned by the police.
It's a tense situation.
But Kristen, Tracy's sister, she stands up to the officer.
Prevents them from searching the car.
A little bit of defiance in the face of overwhelming power.
It's a small victory, but it's something.
And then comes the reckoning.
The meeting with Dennis at the EG&G office in Indian Springs.
Where they lay down the law.
Dennis shows Lazar photos of him and his friends taken during their observation attempts.
The proof they were being watched,
And he demands their names and contact information.
which Lazar reluctantly gives him.
He has no choice.
But Dennis is strangely cheerful about it all.
It all starts with his partner Tracy noticing some unsettling things happening back when they were living in Las Vegas.
Yeah, Tracy observes these two men in a car parked outside their house day after day. She even mentions their strange behavior just sitting there like they're watching.
Yeah, it's like something straight out of a spy movie.
Yeah.
Always there, never interacting, just observing. And what's interesting is Lazar's initial explanation to Tracy.
He plays it down, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Says it's probably just routine, part of the security clearance process.
But you can see the contrast, right? Lazar's almost nonchalant about it, but Tracy's genuinely creeped out. It really highlights the shift in perspective, what becomes normal when you're supposedly dealing with top secret stuff.
Absolutely. And this sense of being watched, it's not just a throwaway detail.
It really sets the tone for the entire narrative. It's the first hint that things are about to get a whole lot weirder.
Then Lazar starts describing his work. And we're introduced to these fuel triangles. Now, when he first encountered them, what did these things actually look like?
He describes them as surprisingly small, like the size of a half-dollar coin and maybe a quarter of an inch thick.
Not exactly what you picture when you think of powering a spacecraft, right?
No, not really. But he's very specific about their shape and size. He even mentions seeing two stacked together, which kind of gave him an idea of how they might be used.
And then there's his theory about how these triangles were made, this cone-cutting theory he talks about. Could you break that down for us?
Sure, so Lazar imagines this larger block of the fuel material shaped into a cone, and then a cutting tool slices through it at different angles while it's rotating, and that's how you get the triangular pieces. He even bounces this idea off Dennis and Barry, his colleagues, and they seem to agree with his assessment.
So it's not just some random idea he came up with.
No, it seemed like there was some consensus on this theory. And then Dennis brings in a cylindrical ingot of the same material. It's like a casual confirmation.
It's weird how they're just casually handling this potentially revolutionary material.
That's what I find so fascinating about Lazar's perspective. He often admits that he only understood small parts of a much bigger picture.
He's very upfront about not having all the answers.
He actually uses this great phrase. He felt like a moving part in a large and complicated machine, like he was just one cog and information was deliberately compartmentalized. He mentions trusting Dennis and those in charge to have his best interests in mind, even though he knew deep down that it probably wasn't true.
It's a classic theme, right? That feeling of being a small piece in a massive operation where you don't get to see the whole picture.
Absolutely. It's a staple of these kinds of narratives, where individuals are kept in the dark about the true scope of what they're involved in.
And this sense of being kept in the dark continues when Lazar describes a trip to a machine shop at LANL, Los Alamos National Laboratory. This wasn't his usual workplace, right?
No, it seems like this was a special trip. He describes being in unfamiliar territory. Even the way you enter the place was different.
He goes into detail about getting a visitor badge, exchanging an envelope with this woman who just disappears without saying a word. The whole thing feels very cloak and dagger.
Right, very procedural, almost robotic.
Yeah.
And then he finally meets the supervisor of the machine shop he needs to work with.
And the instructions he gives the supervisor are incredibly specific, especially regarding the handling of the material.
He's adamant that every single bit of the material has to be returned. No exceptions. Any residue, any shavings from making the fuel triangles, everything had to be accounted for. Total accountability.
It's like they're working with something incredibly precious and potentially dangerous.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is the supervisor's reaction. He seems less concerned with where the material comes from and more interested in its physical properties.
Like how a scientist would approach any new material.
Exactly. He asks about phase changes, like whether it changes from solid to liquid under different conditions, and thermal expansion, how much it expands or contracts with temperature changes. Lazar even admits that his knowledge in these very specific areas of material science wasn't that great. He actually thought about trying to impress the supervisor by mentioning his assumed familiarity with other dangerous materials they might be working with at LANL, like plutonium or gallium alloys, but he decided against it.
It's a great little detail that really humanizes him.
It does. And it shows that while Lazar had his expertise, he wasn't a walking encyclopedia on every single scientific concept. He was a specialist, but not necessarily privy to the bigger picture.
Exactly. And it reinforces that idea of compartmentalization. He was given very specific tasks without necessarily understanding the broader context of the materials he was working with.
It seems like he was deliberately kept in a kind of information bubble.
Then, things take a turn towards personal safety. Instead of getting new research directives, Dennis gives Lazar something unexpected, a .22 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver, and he's told to carry it with him at all times when he's off-site.
And Lazar's reaction is priceless. He already owns a .44 Magnum and an Uzi. He even points out that trying to conceal the smaller revolver in the scorching Las Vegas heat would mean wearing a long coat all the time, which is just impractical. He ends up registering his own preferred weapons.
I love that little detail. He's given a gun, but he's already got bigger ones at home.
It's almost comical, but it also shows how serious things were becoming.
Yeah, this directive to arm himself, especially after all the suspicions about being watched, really ramps up the tension.
It definitely suggests there's a real or perceived threat surrounding his work.
And all this pressure, all this secrecy, eventually leads to Lazar slipping up. He mentions needing guns for work to his friend Gene Huff.
And their friendship wasn't exactly conventional, was it?
No, not really. Gene was Lazar's partner in his photo processing business, but they also had this shared fascination with explosives and pyrotechnics. They even hosted these gatherings called Desert Blast, where they'd blow stuff up in the desert.
So revealing that he needs guns for his work, after being so secretive, it's a big deal. Luckily, Gene seems to sense Lazar's unease and doesn't pry for more information at that point.
But it shows how the strain of keeping such a huge secret can start to affect your personal life. And this brings us to Lazar's first encounter with what he claims is an alien spacecraft.
He gets a direct order to be at the installation, and that's where he gets to examine a saucer-shaped craft in one of the hangars. He describes it as a pivotal moment, actually seeing the object of his research up close for the first time.
So what are his initial impressions? What are the key details he focuses on?
The craft is massive, about 50 feet in diameter and 20 feet tall. But what strikes him immediately is how smooth it is. There are no panel lines, no welds, no rivets, nothing. It's like a single, seamless piece of metal.
Like it was grown rather than built.
Exactly. And the color is this uniform, dark aluminum across the entire surface, except for these 4 black rectangular areas near the top of the dome. He speculates that these could be sensor arrays.
Okay, so that's the outside. What about the inside? What does he find when he gets inside the craft?
He enters through a surprisingly small hatch. In fact, it's so small he can't even stand up straight inside. And just like the exterior, the interior is completely seamless. The same dark metallic material, no visible joints or seams.
So this seamless construction, it's not just on the outside.
It's everywhere. He describes navigating through a honeycombed passageway and then finding 3 molded seats. He compares them to Scandinavian chairs, but without legs. And what's really striking is that there's no obvious control panel, no lights, switches, dials, or screens. The only thing he sees, apart from the seats, is a single pipe running from the ceiling to the floor, which he figures is part of the propulsion system.
Talk about minimalist design.
Right. And he also mentions a second level inside the craft.
What's up there?
On the second level, he sees more components of the propulsion system that he recognizes from his work in the lab. The reactor, the waveguide piping, and more conduits leading down to what he believes are the emitters located on the underside of the craft. He also notes that the craft itself is resting on a platform or pedestal. Interestingly, he and Barry are not allowed to access a presumed third level, which he thinks might be the cockpit.
Denied access. More secrecy.
It definitely adds to the mystery.
So even though the interior seems pretty cramped and strange, Lazar feels this urge to just be inside the craft.
Yeah.
Why is that?
He talks about how he likes to sit with the problem, to physically immerse himself in a challenge to gain a better understanding.
Like a hands-on learner.
Exactly. So even though the craft seems designed for being smaller than humans, he feels that simply being inside might help him intuitively grasp how it works.
It's like he's trying to absorb knowledge through osmosis.
Maybe. But it shows his deep curiosity and his desire to understand, even on a subconscious level.
And then we get to the part where Lazar witnesses one of these crafts in action, at least in a limited way. He describes a low-performance test flight.
Right. He and Barry are notified that a test is about to happen. They go outside and they see several saucer-shaped craft in open hangars, including the one he had examined earlier, which he starts calling the sport model. He's also surprised by how few people are present for such a big event.
Okay, take us through the test flight. What does he see and hear?
First, there's this loud hissing sound. He compares it to the noise you might hear from an electrical substation.
So a high-voltage kind of sound.
Yeah. And then the craft starts to lift off the ground, but it's wobbly, unstable. As it rises, he sees this blue corona discharge coming from the underside. It looks like the air is being ionized by a powerful energy field.
Like those electrical arcs you sometimes see.
Exactly. And as the craft reaches a height of about 30 to 40 feet, the wobbling stops, the hissing dies down, and it just hovers there silently.
So it's not a smooth takeoff.
No, not at all. And he also describes the arrangement of the emitters on the bottom of the craft.
The things that supposedly manipulate gravity.
Right. He sees 3 of them arranged in a triangle, one pointed straight down and the other 2 at right angles to it. Based on their theories, they figure the orientation of these emitters determines the direction the craft moves in.
Interesting. So it's like thrust vectoring, but with gravity.
Exactly. And there's this technician there wearing headphones who seems to be communicating with someone, presumably the pilot. Lazar even wonders if radio waves can even work properly near a gravity field.
It's like he's questioning the very physics of the situation.
Yeah, he's really trying to wrap his head around how this technology could even be possible. After a while, the craft descends and lands. It's just as wobbly going down as it was going up. And Dennis's reaction...
Classic Dennis.
Totally. He just says, that's it.
Like it was nothing special.
Totally understated. But for Lazar, this low performance test, even with its limitations, it seemed to validate some of their theories about how the craft's propulsion system works. It wasn't just abstract calculations anymore, it was something tangible.
So they're seeing their theories come to life.
Absolutely. It's a real-world demonstration, even if it's a limited one, that their ideas about the reactor, the amplifier, and the emitters manipulating a gravity field, that it actually has some basis in reality. They didn't see any crazy maneuvers or high-speed flight, but the controlled generation of an energy field and a localized gravitational effect, it was right there in front of them.
Now, after these first-hand observations, Lazar starts trying to explain these seemingly impossible concepts, especially gravity control and faster-than-light travel. He uses these really interesting analogies to make these ideas more digestible.
Yeah, he's trying to break it down for the average person, to make sense of something that seems to defy conventional physics.
So how does he explain gravity control?
He uses this great analogy of a bowling ball on a stretched mattress. The craft, with its emitters, is like someone pressing down on the mattress around the bowling ball. This creates a dip, and the ball rolls towards the dip, right? It's not about pushing against gravity directly. It's about manipulating the curvature of space-time around the object.
So it's not about fighting gravity, but rather shaping it.
Exactly. And then to explain traveling across vast distances, the idea of folding space, he uses this image of a ball on one end of a towel and a frisbee on the other end. The emitters on the frisbee pull the towel towards the ball, effectively shrinking the distance between them.
So the craft isn't traveling through space linearly, it's bending space itself to bring its destination closer.
That's the idea. And he makes this interesting connection that manipulating gravity might also allow you to manipulate time, which could potentially circumvent the limitations of conventional space travel for humans.
It's mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah.
But as these incredible experiences continue, Lazar also notices that he's being watched again, even more intensely this time. It's like the paranoia is ramping up.
He starts seeing these 2 men in dark suits watching his house from across the street. And he also sees the same car following him around town, like when he goes to Home Depot.
Yeah.
He even describes these guys in detail, average-looking, white, late 30s, early 40s, always in dark suits, white shirts, and sunglasses. It's like they're straight out of central casting for government agents.
Textbook Men in Black.
Totally. And this time, it's not just a one-time thing. The surveillance becomes constant with different cars and shifts of men. It's like a dedicated operation. Even Tracy starts to notice and makes jokes about him being paranoid, but Lazar isn't laughing.
He's genuinely scared at this point.
Oh, yeah. He's worried about what's going on and why they're watching him so closely. And to make matters worse, his calls to Dennis go unanswered. He's starting to feel isolated and the pressure's mounting. He even reflects on signing that classified document, giving up some of his constitutional rights.
Looks like he's trapped in a web of his own making.
Absolutely. He's caught between this incredible secret and the potential dangers it brings. And eventually, the sense of isolation and paranoia pushes him to confide in his friend Jean.
What happens in that conversation?
Lazar tells Jean about some of what he's been working on, his frustrations with the lack of progress. And to Jean's credit, he's supportive. He listens, gives advice. It's around this time that Lazar gets his first and only paycheck from the Department of Naval Intelligence.
Yeah.
It's a tiny amount, especially considering his background and the supposedly groundbreaking work he's doing. This adds to his growing disillusionment.
It's like he's being exploited.
It definitely feels that way. And then John Lear, who is already a big name in UFO circles, finds out about Lazar's work at LNL.
John Layer, the guy who believed in all sorts of conspiracies.
That's the one. And he makes it clear to Lazar that he believes in alien spacecraft. Lazar at this point is still skeptical about the extraterrestrial aspect, but he sees John's knowledge and connections, especially in government and military circles, as potentially valuable.
So Lazar is still trying to figure things out.
He's looking for answers, for someone who might understand the bigger picture, even if he doesn't agree with everything they say.
And then, the consequences of Lazar sharing this classified information, they start to hit home. Dennis shows up at his house, and things get tense.
It happens right after Lazar makes that slip to Jean about needing guns for work.
So they were definitely monitoring his conversations.
It seems like they were watching his every move.
What happens when Dennis confronts Lazar?
Dennis is angry. He accuses Lazar of betraying their trust by telling his friends about the project, and then he demands the names and contact information of everyone Lazar has talked to, his friends, his family, everyone.
That's chilling.
It gets worse. Dennis reveals that they have transcripts of phone calls between Tracy, Jean, John, and Jason. It's like they were all being monitored, and it makes Lazar feel totally betrayed.
It's like his whole world is collapsing.
He describes it as feeling like he's been scooped out, like all the trust and security he had was an illusion.
And this betrayal, both professionally and personally, has a devastating effect on his life.
Tracy moves out. They try marriage counseling, but it doesn't work. The therapist even fires them as clients, basically saying their problems are beyond help. It's the end of his second marriage, and it's all tangled up with the secrecy and stress of his work.
So what does Lazar do? He's lost his job, his wife, his sense of safety. He decides to go public with his story.
It's a huge decision, a risky one.
He reaches out to journalists George Knapp and Bob Stovall, and they agree to interview him on camera, but with his identity protected. He uses the pseudonym Dennis.
So it's like he's taking back some control. He's choosing to tell his story on his own terms, even if it means putting himself in danger.
And the first interview airs, focusing on the existence of these advanced aircraft and Lazar's general role at S4. He doesn't go into specifics about his falling out with his employers.
It's like he's testing the waters.
But even that limited disclosure provokes a response. He gets a threatening phone call from the real Dennis.
Which confirms his fears. Going public has made him a target. And he realizes that running away, disappearing, it's probably not an option.
He's in too deep.
He even describes this weird encounter at Gene's office with another guy named Gene who casually mentions the alien guy on TV. It's a sign that his story is spreading, gaining traction.
It's becoming a public sensation.
And Lazar, he's not done. He tries to confront Dennis in person, arranges a meeting at the Union Plaza Hotel, brings Gene and Joe Vendinetti along as witnesses.
And how does that go?
It's a total bust and kind of surreal. They meet at a blackjack table in the casino. Dennis basically ignores Lazar, keeps playing cards, barely acknowledges him. It's a strange, unsatisfying confrontation that leaves more questions than answers.
It's like Dennis is sending a message. I'm not afraid of you.
It definitely feels that way. But despite all the fallout, all the risks, Lazar doesn't back down.
He agrees to do more interviews with George Knapp, this time revealing his true identity. He even goes back to Los Alamos with Knapp to try and confirm his employment records.
And he reflects on his motivations. At first, it was about self-preservation, protecting himself from those who are threatening him, but it evolves into something more. He starts to believe that the public has a right to know about what he's seen, about these advanced technologies, about the possibility of alien life.
So it's about more than just saving himself.
It's about truth and transparency, even if it costs him everything. But even with this newfound purpose, he still carries a lot of mixed emotions, regrets about his time at S4, the toll it took on his personal life.
So let's recap. We've covered Lazar's early observations, that feeling of being watched, the strange work with the fuel triangles and the trip to LNL, then the escalating security concerns, getting a gun, and finally seeing the saucer-shaped craft for the first time.
We talked about the test flights, the theories about gravity control and folding space, and how the pressure of keeping this huge secret led him to confide in his friends. And then the fallout, the betrayal, the decision to go public, and the aftermath.
It's a truly incredible story.
Mind-boggling, really.
And this entire deep dive, it's all based on Bob Lazar's own account in Dreamland. We've presented his story, his claims, his experiences, as he tells them.
We've tried to give you, the listener, a direct line to the source material so you can form your own conclusions.
And this brings us to a question for you, our listener. What does this story, with all its intricate details and shocking claims, what does it tell you about secrecy, about the pursuit of knowledge, about what happens when someone claims to have witnessed something that challenges our understanding of reality.
It's a question worth pondering. What would you do if you were in Lazar's shoes? What would you believe?
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it. It makes you think, makes you question, makes you wonder.
And that's what we're all about here, exploring the unknown, pushing the boundaries of what we think we know. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.